He is one of the most important and famous characters in the history of Middle-earth. His life would be one marked by tragic separation from those he loved, and shaped by his choice to be counted among the elves. Through his more than 6,500 years, he rises through war and hardship to become one of the greatest elves in the world. After watching his brother's people fall into darkness and destruction time and again, he would finally see it renewed by one he himself had fostered. Today on Nerd of the Rings, we cover the life and travels of Elrond Half-elven. Today's video is brought to you by SlideBelts, creators of high-quality belts featuring unique ratcheting buckles. I've personally used SlideBelts for some time now, and they honestly make a fantastic product. It also makes a great gift since you can buy one size and trim it to fit. Be sure to stick around to the end of the video for a special discount code for my viewers, redeemable at slidebelts.com. Elrond and his twin brother Elros are born in the year 532 of the First Age, in the havens of Sirion, to their father Eärendil and mother Elwing. At this time, the Dark Lord Morgoth rules over most of Beleriand, and the days grow increasingly bleak for the free peoples of Middle-earth. In 538, when the twins are just 6 years old, the havens are attacked by the sons of Feanor. The Feanorians are driven by their oath to once again kill their fellow elves in pursuit of one of the Silmarils. Elwing, who is in possession of the Silmaril, jumps into the sea during this third kinslaying. She would be born to Eärendil's ship and travel with him on his great voyage to Valinor. The twins would likely never again see their parents. By the end of the battle, there are just two sons of Feanor alive, Maedhros and Maglor. They initially take Elrond and Elros as captives. However, Maglor in particular takes pity on the twins, rescuing them and raising them himself. It is said that a mutual love grows between Maglor and the twins. The War of Wrath follows shortly after, from 545 to 587. It is after this nigh-apocalyptic battle and the disappearance of their foster father that the Valar give to Elrond and Elros a choice. Having descended from two man-elf marriages of the First Age, the twins are granted the ability to choose whether they would be counted among the elves, remaining immortal, or to be counted among the Edain and receive the gift of men, mortality. While Elros chooses to be counted among men, Elrond chooses to remain among the elves. Thus, at the age of 58, Elrond and Elros go their separate ways. Elros sails the seas, following the star of their father Eärendil, to discover the newly risen land of Númenor, a gift for the Edain. Elrond settles in Lindon, where he would serve under the High King of the Noldor, Gil-galad. In the coming centuries, Elrond becomes known as both a great healer and lore master. His brother is gifted with an extraordinarily long life, even for a Númenorian. In 442, Elros dies at the age of 500. And while Elros would lay the foundation for one of the greatest realms to ever exist, his time would come to an end, while Elrond would remain, playing a major role for thousands of years. As we've covered in other videos here on Nerd of the Rings, Lindon would flourish in peace for 1,200 years. In that year, Sauron comes to Eriador seeking to infiltrate the elves. Gil-galad and Elrond perceived that this Lord of Gifts was not fair as he seemed, and refuse him entry into their lands. Instead, Sauron tricks the elves of Eregion into creating the Rings of Power, and in 1695, the lands are engulfed in the War of the Elves and Sauron. Elrond is sent by Gil-galad to lead the army of Lindon in aiding Eregion. Unfortunately, their arrival is too late, and their forces too small to defend the realm. They are countered by Sauron, and in danger of being overrun when the dwarves of Moria attack, allowing Elrond and the refugees of Eregion to flee north. By 1697, Eregion is ravaged by Sauron's forces, and Elrond establishes the stronghold of Imladris, north of the river Bruinen. With Eregion and its lord destroyed, Sauron turns his attention to Lindon. He sends the majority of his forces west to move against Gil-galad, while also leaving a strong force to lay siege upon Rivendell. As Sauron continues his brutal march through Eriador, many more elven refugees flee to Elrond's realm. By 1700, only Imladris and the far west of Lindon remain free of Sauron's control. Fortunately, the descendants of Elros would come. The Númenóreans reinforced the Elves of Lindon in massive might and numbers, defeating Sauron's horde and forcing the Dark Lord to flee back to Mordor. With Sauron defeated, Gil-galad and Tar Minastir quickly free Imladris of its attackers. There they hold a council, where it is decided that Rivendell should be maintained as an elven stronghold in Eriador. Gil-galad appoints Elrond to be his vice-regent in Eriador, and passes his Ring of Power, Vilya, to Elrond. In 1701, Galadriel and her daughter Celebrian travel from Lorien to Rivendell, searching for Celeborn. There they would not only find Galadriel's husband, but it is then that Celebrian would first meet Elrond. Centuries later, after the fall of his brother's once great kingdom, the rise of new kingdoms of men, and the re-emergence of Sauron, Elrond would once again join his kin and those of his brother in war. After the last alliance of elves and men is formed in 3430, Gil-galad and Elendil marched to Imladris. After spending 3 years in Elrond's realm forging weapons and making battle plans, the armies march south to Mordor. Elrond serves as Gil-galad's herald and fights throughout the 7 years of the conflict. In 3441, in the war's final moments, Elrond witnesses the epic fight between Gil-galad, Elendil, and Sauron, during which all three are slain. When Isildur cuts the ring from Sauron's body, Elrond joins Círdan in advising the heir of Elendil to cast the ring into Mount Doom and destroy it, but Isildur refuses. Victorious in the war, yet having lost much, Elrond goes back to Rivendell as Isildur travels to Gondor. 2 years into the Third Age, Isildur leaves Gondor in the hands of his nephew, making his way north to both take up the rule of Arnor and reunite with his wife and youngest son. However, the company is attacked by orcs on their way to Imladris, and after sending the shards of Narsil with his esquire Otar, Isildur and his 3 eldest sons are killed by the orcs. Otar brings the shards of Narsil to Elrond, and they would remain under his care for over 3,000 years. Elrond foretold that these shards would not be reforged until the One Ring was found and Sauron had returned once more. Also in his keeping is Isildur's surviving son, Valandil, who was just 4 years old when his father had set out for war. Now 13 years old, Valandil becomes the first in a long line of heirs of Elendil to be fostered by Elrond. In 109 of the Third Age, Elrond and Celebrian are married in Rivendell, and their children would soon follow. First, their twin sons Elladan and Elrohir in 130, and their daughter Arwen in 241. For over 1,000 years, Rivendell would continue as a peaceful realm, becoming one of the greatest dwellings of the elves, thanks in part to Elrond's possession of a Ring of Power. However, a new power would rise in the north, the Witch Kingdom of Angmar. While the Witch King would primarily make war upon the men of Arnor, one of his earliest efforts to weaken Eriador is to attack Rivendell. This second siege of Imladris takes place sometime between 1356 and 1409 of the Third Age. By 1409, the siege is broken, and after being reinforced by the Elves of Lorien, and with the help of the Elves of Lindon, Elrond is able to drive the Witch King out of Eriador, subduing his threat for many years. After centuries of battles, which are covered in an earlier video here on the channel, Angmar would finally be defeated, thanks to a force from Gondor, and an army led by Glorfindel from Rivendell. With no man nor orc of Angmar left west of the Misty Mountains, Eriador is finally freed from this evil menace. However, the Witch King's purpose was accomplished, and the once mighty realm of Arnor is reduced to a handful of Dunedain rangers in the wild. At this time, Elrond is entrusted with more heirlooms of his brother's people, the Ring of Barahir and the Scepter of Annúminas. Together with the shards of Narsil, they would await the one who would reclaim the throne of Arnor. Being among the wisest beings in Middle-earth, Elrond would take counsel with others of his own kind, as well as the wizards, and after a long watchful peace, a dark presence emerges in Dol Guldur, leading the wise to form the White Council in 2463. Before Elrond would see any battles as part of the council, he would once again suffer a terrible loss. In 2509, Celebrian leaves Rivendell to visit her parents in Lorien. Her group takes the Redhorn Pass, also known as the Pass of Caradhras. During their crossing of the mountain, they are attacked by orcs and scattered. Celebrian is captured and tormented, and receives a poisoned wound. Elladan and Elrohir would pursue the orcs and rescue their mother, bringing her back home to Rivendell. Elrond, being the great healer that he is, successfully heals her body, but he is unable to heal the damage her torment had done to her mind. Celebrian loses all delight in Middle-earth, and in 2510, she makes the journey which possessed her only hope for healing. Leaving Elrond and their children behind, Celebrian sails into the west. In 2933, after the death of his father, a 2-year-old Aragorn would be the last in a line of heirs to be fostered by Elrond. In part to protect the young child, Elrond gives him the name Estel, meaning hope, and conceals his true lineage from him until he would come of age. When Estel is 10 years old, Elrond would welcome new visitors to his home. Near midsummer 2941, the company of Thorin Oakenshield arrives at the last homely house. Here we see that Elrond, unlike his fellow elves in Mirkwood and later Lorien, is quite welcoming to Durin's folk. Perhaps he had not forgotten their people, who had come to his aid all those years ago. While the company is in Imladris, Elrond examines the swords that Gandalf and Thorin had found in the Troll Cave. The lore master determines Thorin's is called Orcrist, the Goblin Cleaver, and Gandalf's is Glamdring, the Foehammer. These swords were forged in the great First Age city of Gondolin, and Glamdring was once the sword of Elrond's great-grandfather, King Turgon. Turning now to Thror's map, Elrond discovers the Moon Letters, written with Ithildin, the same material used on the doors of Durin, which reflected starlight and moonlight. With Elrond's expertise, Bilbo and the dwarves learn the location of the secret entrance to Erebor. Later that very year, knowing that the necromancer is Sauron, the White Council attacks Dol Guldur, forcing Sauron to flee to Mordor and disrupting his plans for a northern conquest. 10 years later, when Estel is 20 years old, he returns to Rivendell after great deeds with Elladan and Elrohir. Elrond looked at him and was pleased, for he saw that he was fair and noble and was early come to manhood, though he would yet become greater in body and in mind. That day, therefore, Elrond called him by his true name and told him who he was and whose son, and he delivered to him the heirlooms of his house. "Here is the Ring of Barahir," he said, "the token of our kinship from afar, and here also are the shards of Narsil. With these you may yet do great deeds, for I foretell that the span of your life shall be greater than the measure of men, unless evil befalls you, or you fail at the test. But the test will be hard and long. The scepter of Annúminas I withhold, for you have yet to earn it." The very next day, Aragorn is walking alone in the woods when he meets Arwen for the first time, for she had been living for many years with Galadriel, her grandmother. 29 years later, Arwen and Aragorn would meet again, this time in Lorien. There they would pledge themselves to one another. When Elrond hears this, his heart is grieved, and the doom he long feared was no easier to endure. Therefore he meets with Isildur's heir. My son, years come when hope will fade, and beyond them little is clear to me. And now a shadow lies between us. Maybe it has been appointed so, that by my loss the kingship of men may be restored. Therefore, though I love you, I say to you, Arwen Undomiel shall not diminish her life's grace for less cause. She shall not be the bride of any man less than the king of both Gondor and Arnor. To me then, even our victory can bring only sorrow and parting, but to you, hope of joy for a while. For a while. Alas, my son, I fear that to Arwen the doom of men may seem hard at the ending. With this understanding, Aragorn would go forth to danger and toil, his path leading him ever closer to his fate. The White Council meets for the last time in 2953, when Saruman says that he has discovered the ring passed down the Anduin and into the sea, seeking to give the others a false sense of security while he seeks it for his own. Elrond would next enter the story of the War of the Ring. In the fall of 3018, Frodo Baggins is sent out on a quest to take the One Ring to Rivendell. When the halfling arrives, having been stabbed on Weathertop, Elrond's healing powers are once again put to the test. He is successful, and the Hobbit recovers, though, like Celebrian, Frodo would not fully heal on this side of the sea. On October 25th, Elrond calls a council to decide what should be done with the One Ring. In Tolkien's text, we find a great description of Elrond. The face of Elrond was ageless, neither old nor young, though in it was written the memory of many things both glad and sorrowful. His hair was dark as shadows of twilight, and upon it was set a circlet of silver. His eyes were gray as a clear evening, and in them was a light like the light of stars. Venerable he seemed as a king crowned with many winters, and yet hale as a tired warrior in the fullness of his strength. He was the Lord of Rivendell, and mighty among both elves and men. The Council of Elrond would be one of the most important events in the Third Age, as it is decided that they must attempt to destroy the ring in the fires of Mount Doom. During the meeting, Elrond tells much of what he knows of Isildur and the ring's history that he was present for. By now, the ring has been discovered, and Sauron has returned. And just as Elrond had predicted, the sword that was broken would be remade. The Fellowship, including the ring-bearer Frodo and Elrond's foster son Aragorn, sets out on December 25th. But that would not be the end for the House of Elrond in this war. Elladan and Elrohir are sent by their father to join the Dúnedain riding south to join their chieftain. The twins deliver to Aragorn a reminder from their father of an ancient prophecy. Thus, the Grey Company would follow Aragorn on the paths of the dead and onward to Minas Tirith. When Aragorn later declares that the survivors of the Pelennor Fields should attack Mordor as a diversion, Elrohir confirms this as also being Elrond's advice. As we know, the diversion and the Ringbearer's quest was a success in that the ring is destroyed and Sauron is finally defeated. On May 1st, Aragorn is crowned king of the reunited kingdom, ruling over both Gondor and Arnor. True to his word, Elrond escorts Arwen to Gondor. After stopping for a brief time in Lothlorien, they arrive in Minas Tirith in late June, and Aragorn and Arwen are married on Midsummer's Day 3019. While this was a joyous occasion, as his foster son was now king, and the men of his brother Elros were finally free from the scourge of Sauron, Elrond must once again part from one whom he greatly loves. For with her marriage to Aragorn, Arwen made the same choice as Luthien, and even Elros before her. She is now bound to immortal life, and the gift of men is now her future. Elrond parts from Arwen in great sorrow, not knowing if he would ever meet her again. Elrond would ride with Gandalf and the hobbits to Rivendell before the others make their return trip to the Shire. 2 years later, on September 29, 3021, Elrond boards the White Ship at the Grey Havens. He is joined by Galadriel, Gandalf, Shadowfax, Bilbo, and Frodo as they make their last great journey to the Undying Lands. Elladan and Elrohir stay behind for at least some time in Rivendell. Like their sister, they too would have the choice of being counted among men or elves. Their decision remains a mystery. Would Elrond's sons join him in the uttermost west, or remain behind in Middle-earth as their sister had? While we don't know for certain, we can take comfort that there was likely one dear to Elrond, already awaiting him in Valinor. I love the survival belt from SlideBelts. Not only does it feature an LED flashlight for dark moments, but also a stainless steel knife, a fire starter, and a bottle opener. Combined with the convenience of SlideBelts' ratcheting buckle, it helps me feel a bit more like a modern-day ranger. And right now you can save 20% off your order with the code NERDOFTHERINGS. For some of the best belts you'll ever find, go to slidebelts.com. As always, I want to say a huge thank you to my Patreon supporters who make this channel possible. Tom DeBombadil 19, Listen Me the Cinda, Mandu Pandu, Andrew Carlisle, The Mighty Mim, Team Weasel, Sky Carcass, SlideBelts, Dane Ragnarsson, Salim Rahman, Zetrock, Berto Berg, Grand Strategy Nerd, Graham Darricott, The Dark-Haired One, Wyland, Michael Wu, and Debbie. If you enjoyed the artwork in this video, check out the artists in the description and purchase prints of their great work for yourself. Thanks so much for watching and subscribing, and we'll see you next time on Nerd of the Rings.